The cargo ship drifted into orbit around Lanairis, for with all the grace of an overweight cow stumbling onto ice. Inside the cockpit, the pilot muttered to himself about the absurdity of flying a vessel that had been patched together with more duct tape than actual starship-grade alloy. The ship's official name was Stellar Wind, but he usually called it Stellar Wheeze, because that was the sound it made whenever he asked the engines for more than minimal thrust. The cockpit smelled faintly of burnt coffee and overheating circuitry, an aroma he had grown weirdly accustomed to, like some sort of interstellar cologne only pilots would tolerate. He leaned forward, squinting through the viewport at the colony below. Lanairis, for was not what the travel brochures promised. There were no glittering spires, no vibrant market domes filled with exotic delicacies. Instead, the settlement looked like someone had dumped a handful of prefab modules on a dust ball and hoped for the best. Thin streaks of smoke rose from the outskirts, and even from orbit he could see patrol drones zipping nervously across the skies like anxious mosquitoes. "Yeah, that's definitely the smell of trouble," he murmured to himself, before speaking into the comms. "Colony Control, this is Stellar Wheeze, Stellar Wind. I've got a cargo of hydrospanners, synthetic grain, and one very confused houseplant that refuses to die. Requesting clearance to land." Static hissed. Then a bored voice replied, "You picked a bad day, pilot. The colony's on lockdown. Civil unrest. Land at your own risk. Civil unrest." He exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. He hated that phrase. It was bureaucratic code for riots, blast or fire, and someone's goat has definitely been set loose in the governor's office. Still, he'd been paid to deliver the cargo, and unless he wanted to live on synthetic grain and water filters for the next 6 months, he needed the paycheck. The ship groaned as he brought it down through the atmosphere. Dust swallowed the viewports, a storm of copper-colored grit that made the world outside look like a furnace. He kept muttering to himself to keep the nerves down, tossing out lines like, "If I survive this, I'm petitioning the council for a hazard bonus, and a new coffee machine." The landing pad was barely visible through the storm, but the autopilot did its job, mostly. They touched down with a jolt that rattled every bone in his spine, and the console made a noise suspiciously similar to a dying cat. He slapped the dashboard. "Don't give me that, we both survived worse. Remember Arcturus? The frozen toilets?" "Yeah, exactly. Don't quit on me now." The airlock hissed open, letting in the dry sting of Lanairis wind. Outside, the colony lay in uneasy silence. A few colonists hurried along the edges of the landing bay, heads down, avoiding eye contact. Off in the distance, he could hear the low thump of explosions. His stomach sank. He didn't like the sound of organized explosives. It meant somebody had a plan, and plans were always messier than accidents. As he stepped out, a squad of security officers appeared, their armor scratched and dented, helmets hanging loose. They looked less like peacekeepers and more like tired janitors who'd been handed rifles. One of them eyed him suspiciously. "You the cargo pilot?" He raised his hands as if they'd accused him of smuggling antimatter grenades. "Guilty as charged. Hydrospanners, grain, and a suicidal plant. You want me to start unloading, or should I wait until the riot dies down?" The officer scowled, but before he could reply, a loud cheer rose from the streets beyond the colony's barricades. It wasn't the cheerful kind of cheer one heard at sports games, it was sharper, filled with anger and defiance. The pilot turned toward the sound, curiosity tugging at him. And then he saw her. She stood atop a makeshift platform built from supply crates and half a broken shuttle wing. Her hair caught the dust light, dark strands streaked with the copper glow of the storm. Her ears were long, tapering elegantly to points that marked her as not quite human, though in every other way she looked like any woman he might have passed in a crowded station corridor. What set her apart was the fire in her eyes, the kind that could burn through metal if she stared long enough. She raised her voice, and though the storm snatched away fragments of sound, the words carried with startling clarity. "No more silence. No more bending to those who would treat us as less. The crowd roared in response. She lifted her arm, and the people lifted theirs with her, a wave of fists and makeshift weapons. The pilot blinked, feeling the weight of the moment. Here was no random street rabble, this was a rebellion crystallizing in real time. One of the officers beside him muttered, "That's her. The instigator. The alien woman. She's the reason we're drowning in riots." The pilot tilted his head. "She seems more organized than riot. I'd call that a movement. With capital letters." He paused. "Also, did you hear how clear her voice was in this storm? Impressive lungs." The officer glared at him. "Not funny." "It was a little funny," the pilot replied under his breath. He should have walked away. This wasn't his fight. He was just a delivery man with a second-hand ship and an unfortunate sense of timing. But something about the woman's presence snagged him. Maybe it was her fearlessness, standing tall against armored troops. Maybe it was the way her words struck with precision, like arrows loosed by a skilled hand. Or maybe it was that, despite the anger in her face, he caught flashes of weariness there too. The crowd shifted, and suddenly her gaze swept toward the landing pad. For an instant, their eyes met across the dust and distance. He froze, mid-thought, and it felt like she could see right through him, past the jokes, past the muttering, straight into the quiet spaces he usually kept locked up. Then her lips curved, not quite a smile, not quite a sneer. She raised her chin as if to say, "Yes, you. I've noticed you." He had no idea why his stomach dropped at that. Probably indigestion from the protein bars. The security squad bristled as the crowd pressed closer, their rifles lifting in shaky unison. The pilot grimaced. Plasma rifles plus angry civilians equaled disaster. He stepped forward quickly, throwing up his hands. "Okay, let's all just breathe, shall we? You with the guns, you're making the situation worse. You with the yelling, you're making them nervous. Can we meet in the middle and, oh, I don't know, complain about the weather instead?" The officer beside him barked, "Stay out of this, pilot." The alien woman's gaze sharpened. She lifted a hand, and the crowd fell into uneasy silence. The storm howled around them, but in that strange pause, every sound seemed distant. She pointed at him, her voice carrying across the bay. "You. Human. What are you doing here?" He felt dozens of eyes pivoting toward him. He swallowed. His instinct was to quip, to defuse, to lean into humor because silence was worse. So he called back, delivering grain. And possibly about to die. Both of which, I might add, were not in the job description. The crowd laughed, actual laughter, sharp and unexpected. Even the woman's lips twitched, though she masked it quickly. The tension cracked, just slightly, like the first fissure in an ice sheet. The pilot breathed out. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't completely doomed. The night skies above Corvallis Station shimmered with the restless traffic of starships. Freighters, warships, smugglers with more creativity than ethics, all of them weaving patterns of light around the orbital ring. Down below, the planet's surface glowed faintly blue, like a candle burning under glass. From the balcony of a cramped inn, the pilot rested his elbows on the railing and tried to convince himself he wasn't entirely out of place. He was, of course, spectacularly out of place. He had arrived that morning on the stellar Wheeze, after the engines threatened mutiny twice and the navigation computer attempted to set a course directly into a sun. He managed to coax it into submission with the timeless technique of banging it repeatedly with a hydrospanner. The ship was now docked, sulking, no doubt plotting new and creative ways to sabotage him on departure. For now, though, he was on solid ground, well, station plating, and that was a rare luxury. He hadn't expected company. He certainly hadn't expected her. The alien woman entered the inn's lounge like she owned every atom of air in the place. Her long ears flicked slightly as she scanned the room, catching sound as efficiently as sensors. She carried herself with that impossible mix of poise and impatience, like a queen who had run out of patience waiting for people to recognize her crown. The other patrons, miners, traders, bureaucrats on their way to nowhere important, shifted uneasily, aware of her presence the way one noticed gravity. And then her gaze landed squarely on him. He nearly choked on his drink. It was synthetic ale, which already tasted like someone had tried to brew liquid resentment, but choking on it added insult to injury. He coughed, wheezed, and muttered under his breath, "Smooth. Very dignified. Exactly how interstellar heroes impress people." She approached, each step deliberate, until she stood across the table. He gestured awkwardly to the seat. "Please, sit. Unless you prefer dramatic standing. It is effective. I feel at least 20% more intimidated." Her lips quirked, not quite a smile. "You talk too much. It's a survival strategy. Works on angry customs officers, occasionally on loan sharks, and once, only once, on a malfunctioning AI that tried to declare me its father. Talking kept me alive. So, yes. I talk." She settled into the chair, folding her hands. For a long moment, neither spoke. Around them, the inn buzzed with low conversations, the shuffle of cards, the rattle of dice. Outside the viewport, ships drifted like fireflies in the void. Finally, she said, "You are human." He blinked. "Unless my mother lied to me, yes. I'm also left-handed, terrible at cooking, and apparently very skilled at attracting trouble. Did you want the full resume?" Her gaze sharpened, but there was a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "You deflect with humor. Of course. If I used sincerity, I'd have been shot ages ago." He leaned back, studying her carefully. "So. You tracked me here. That's flattering, but I should warn you, stalkers usually bring flowers, not political manifestos." This time she smiled, faint but real. "You are reckless. And you," he countered, "are leading something bigger than you want to admit. I saw it. The people who followed you, they weren't just angry. They believed in you." He tapped the table lightly. "Which makes me wonder, why sit here with me instead of planning the next uprising?" Her ears twitched faintly, betraying irritation. "Because uprisings led by rage alone collapse. I need to understand humans better. You are an example." "An example? That's terrifying. You could have picked literally anyone else. There was a guy on the shuttle with a degree in xenopolitics. Instead you picked the idiot with the broken ship and the suicidal houseplant." She tilted her head, curious. "You speak as if your flaws define you. But it is your persistence that interests me. You did not run from the crowd. You spoke, even though no one would have listened. Correction, they did listen. Some even laughed. Which, by the way, was the highlight of my week. Usually, people just groan." The moment lingered, the tension stretching between them like a taut wire. He could see it then, the weariness under her fire, the loneliness that rebellion always carved into its leaders. He wondered how long she had carried it, and whether anyone had ever just let her rest. A loud crash interrupted them. Two miners had started a brawl at the bar, throwing punches with all the grace of malfunctioning droids. The bartender ducked behind the counter. One of the fighters swung wildly and accidentally smacked a waiter carrying steaming bowls of synthesized stew. The stew arced through the air like a meteor, splattering across the floor in a perfect cosmic disaster. The pilot winced. "There goes dinner. Unless you're into floor-flavored cuisine." The alien woman raised an eyebrow. "Do humans always waste food so carelessly?" He spread his hands. "Depends. Sometimes we throw it at weddings. Sometimes we fight wars over it. Sometimes we eat it after it's been dropped, depending on how strict you are about the 5-second rule." Her head tilted again, as though she were cataloguing his absurdity alongside her strategies for insurrection. Yet he saw the way her shoulders eased slightly, the corner of her lips twitching. When the fight subsided under the heavy hand of station security, the lounge returned to uneasy calm. She stood abruptly. "Walk with me." He hesitated, glancing at his unfinished drink. Then he shrugged. "Why not? It's not like I was winning at cards anyway." They stepped out into the station's promenade, a long corridor lined with flickering holo ads. Alien vendors hawked glowing fruit, mechanical pets yapped in synthesized voices, and one enthusiastic robot tried to sell them insurance against meteor strikes. The pilot politely declined, though he muttered, "To be fair, I have been hit by space debris before. Twice. Maybe I should have bought that." She ignored his rambling, striding with purpose. People glanced at her as she passed, the ears, the posture, the unmistakable aura of someone who refused invisibility. She turned to him, her voice quieter now. "Tell me, human. Why do you help people who are not your kind?" He frowned. "That's a strange question. Why wouldn't I?" "Because many of your kind do not. They see us as lesser. Tools. Obstacles." He walked beside her, hands shoved in his pockets. "I've been called lesser plenty of times too. By bosses. By captains. By creditors. Doesn't matter what ears you've got, someone always thinks you're worth less. So I figure, if I can help someone else stand taller, maybe the universe gets a little less stupid." For a long moment, she studied him. The hum of the promenade faded around them, drowned out by the intensity of her gaze. Then she asked softly, "And if helping me means standing against your own people?" He gave a lopsided grin. "Then I'd better stock up on jokes. Because if I'm going to get arrested, I'd like to be funny about it." This time, she laughed outright, clear, unguarded, and brief. It startled him more than any blaster. They walked on, into the artificial night of the station, two figures tangled in something larger than either had planned. Rebellion, humor, and the fragile thread of understanding that stretched between them. The hangar lights of the orbital depot flickered as if they were powered by an indecisive deity. One moment the cavernous space glowed bright white, the next it sank into gloom, shadows stretching across crates and scaffolding like hungry fingers. The pilot sat cross-legged on an upturned container, staring at a diagnostic screen that insisted his ship's reactor was technically stable. He didn't trust that phrasing. Technically stable was the same language doctors used when they told you your appendix hadn't completely exploded. He gave the screen a skeptical squint. Technically stable means you'll either fly or spontaneously combust. And knowing you, he muttered at the stellar wheeze, you'll wait until I'm mid-lunch before choosing combustion. Behind him, footsteps echoed. He knew without turning who it was. The faint hum of her steps, the stillness of the air before her presence settled over it. The alien woman moved like a storm concealed in flesh. Her long ears caught the dim light, their elegant angles sharp against the haze. "You speak to your machine," she said flatly. He glanced back, grinning. "Of course. If I don't, it gets moody. Once I ignored it for 2 days, and it locked me out of the bathroom. Try living without that luxury." Her head tilted, not quite sure if he was joking. She was still learning that about him, whether his words masked truths, or truths wore the mask of his jokes. She came closer, hands clasped behind her back, gaze sweeping over the ship's battered hull. "It looks fragile." He clutched his chest dramatically. "Fragile? This beauty has survived 3 asteroid fields, 5 customs inspections, and 1 extremely unfortunate karaoke night. She may wheeze, but she's loyal." "Like you," she murmured, almost too softly for him to catch. He blinked. "Was that a compliment? I'm writing that down. Historic day." He patted his pocket as though looking for a stylus. Her lips pressed together, but there was the faintest glimmer of amusement in her eyes. Then her face grew serious again, as it always did. Word of me has spread. The governors call me dangerous. A rebel who must be silenced. He leaned back on the crate, arms folded. Well, you are dangerous. I saw you nearly convince 100 people to storm a barricade using nothing but a speech and dramatic hand gestures. That's terrifying. If I tried that, I'd get tomatoes thrown at me. Her ears twitched, not sure whether to take offense. He softened his tone. But dangerous isn't the same as wrong. You've got their attention, at least. Which means now you get to choose whether you're building a war, or something else. She studied him, eyes narrowing. Why do you keep involving yourself in this? You are not one of us. You risk punishment. Imprisonment. Death. Because boredom is worse, he said without hesitation. Then, more seriously, because you remind me what it looks like when someone refuses to stay quiet. And maybe I think you deserve someone at your side who isn't holding a rifle. For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of cooling engines. Then alarms shrieked through the hangar, slicing the quiet apart. Red lights flared across the walls. A mechanical voice announced, "Unidentified fleet approaching. All personnel to stations." Repeat, "Unidentified fleet approaching." The pilot groaned. Unidentified fleet. That's never good. It's either pirates, bureaucrats, or someone trying to sell extended warranties. The alien woman's posture stiffened, her voice taut. It will be the Council's enforcers. They've come to make an example. He hopped down from the crate, slapping the side of his ship as though urging a tired horse. Well, good news is, we're technically stable. Bad news is, technically stable might not hold up against plasma torpedoes. She frowned at him. You cannot face them with jokes. Sure I can. It's my only weapon. Well, that and the ship's single-functioning turret, which overheats if I sneeze near it. He jogged toward the cockpit, waving for her to follow. Come on, if we're going to die, we might as well have a good view. They climbed aboard, the ramp hissing shut as the engines coughed awake. The Stellarwies lifted from the hangar floor with all the grace of a groggy bear, scraping slightly against the docking clamps before finally clearing them. Outside the station, the void filled with sharp points of light, sleek Council frigates sliding into position, their hulls gleaming with authority. The alien woman's breath caught. They came faster than I thought. The pilot eased into his chair, flicking switches with a casualness he didn't feel. Yep, they've got a talent for punctual oppression. Probably have it scheduled between lunch and paperwork. The comm crackled. A cold, official voice filled the cabin, unregistered vessel. Power down your engines and prepare for boarding. Any resistance will be met with lethal force. He rolled his eyes. They always say that. Never once have they offered cookies instead. He looked over at her. So, what's the plan, fearless leader? Do we surrender, or do we improvise badly? Her jaw tightened. If they capture me, they will break the rebellion. But if we fight? He cut in. If we fight, we're toast. Burnt, crispy, served with garnish. He rubbed his chin. But if we stall them? She frowned. Stall. He flipped on the comm, putting on his brightest, most irritating voice. Hello, noble council ships. This is Captain, Banjo McGillicuddy of the Stellarwies. I'd love to surrender, really, but my co-pilot is currently stuck in the restroom. Very awkward. You don't want to board while he's in there. Trust me. There was a long pause on the comm. He imagined the enforcer captain pinching the bridge of his nose. Then, you have 30 seconds to comply. He killed the channel and grinned at her. See? Bought us at least 30 seconds. That's practically a lifetime in space chase math. Despite the tension, she let out a sharp laugh. You are insane. Insanely charming, yes. He cracked his knuckles. All right, hold on. We're about to do something incredibly stupid. The ship lunged forward, engines howling in protest. Warning klaxons blared as targeting locks painted their hull, but he jinked left, then right, weaving through the gaps in the frigate's formation like a drunk man dodging traffic. Plasma burst streaked past them, illuminating the cockpit with violent flashes. Technically stable, he shouted, as if reminding the ship of its status. Stay with me, old girl. She clung to the console, eyes wide but steady. You cannot outrun them forever. Of course not. But I can make them embarrass themselves. And nothing terrifies the council more than looking silly. The chase spiraled around the station, engines burning trails across the stars. Inside the cockpit, laughter and fear tangled together, absurd jokes colliding with the thunder of pursuit. For the pilot, it was just another day of survival. For her, it was a glimpse into a kind of rebellion she hadn't expected, not one of rifles and speeches, but one of laughter in the face of impossible odds. The stellar wheeze limped through orbit like a wounded animal. Its hull bore the scars of the chase, scorch marks along the flank, a cratered indentation near the aft where a plasma bolt had come uncomfortably close to ending both ship and pilot in one spectacular fireball. The engines coughed every few seconds, each sputter accompanied by a mournful whine that sounded suspiciously like the ship muttering curses at its captain. Inside, the pilot slumped in his chair, hair damp with sweat, his shirt sticking to his back. He dragged a hand down his face and exhaled. Well. Good news, we're still alive. Bad news, I think the reactor just lost another tooth. He tapped a console that blinked erratically. See? That's a loose molar right there. The alien woman sat opposite him, posture calm despite the storm they had just outrun. She studied him with that steady, storm-tossed gaze. Her ears angled slightly toward him, always catching more than words. You joke even when death is a breath away. He forced a grin. If I don't laugh, I'll scream. And I like my dignity intact. He paused. Well, as intact as it ever was. Her lips twitched, the faintest shadow of a smile. Then her expression hardened. The rebellion cannot survive like this. My people look to me for guidance, but I give them only fire. Fire burns bright, yes, but it also consumes. He leaned back, letting the chair creak. You're realizing speeches and torches only go so far. People don't just need fire, they need someone willing to sit down with them, listen, and maybe share a bad cup of coffee. Her brows knit. Coffee? He gestured toward the ship's kitchen unit, which had never produced anything resembling actual coffee. Universal symbol for connection. Trust me, wars have been prevented by terrible drinks. She tilted her head, considering. For the first time, her shoulders sagged, the weight visible. Perhaps you are right. Perhaps I have been too blind in my fury. The comm crackled suddenly. A familiar, authoritative voice filled the cabin. Unregistered vessel Stellar Wheeze, this is Council Frigate Resolute. You are surrounded. Power down your ship and surrender immediately. We will not ask again. The pilot sighed. I was hoping they'd at least wait until dessert. Her hand tightened on the armrest, ready to fight. But he held up a palm. No. Not this time. No more running. He turned toward her, his voice softer, steadier than she'd ever heard it. They expect you to fight. To burn bright and then burn out. If you want to win, don't give them what they expect. She stared at him. Then what do we give them? He smiled faintly. Something worse. We give them peace. He flicked the comm back on, his tone casual, almost bored. Council Frigate, hi again. Banjo McGillicuddy here, don't laugh, it's a family name. We'd like to surrender. But on one condition, you listen before you shoot. There was a long silence on the other end, the kind that suggested council officers were glaring at each other, debating whether to vaporize him out of sheer annoyance. Finally, a clipped reply, "State your terms." The alien woman inhaled sharply, eyes widening. He gestured for her to stand, to speak. At first she hesitated, but then she rose, her figure framed by the failing lights of the cockpit. When she spoke, her voice was not the voice of rage he had first heard on the dusty colony streets. It was steady, commanding, resonant. "My people are not enemies. We ask not for thrones, but for dignity. We will not be silent, but we will not burn your cities. We ask for a place at the table, not a place beneath it." The words lingered, heavy, undeniable. The silence that followed felt endless. Then the frigate captain spoke again, tone softer, begrudging. "Transmit your location. We will escort you to negotiation." The channel cut. The pilot leaned back, releasing a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Well, that's either salvation or the longest bureaucratic meeting in galactic history." She turned to him slowly, disbelief flickering across her face. "They listened." "Of course they did." He grinned. "You've got a good voice. Should try radio someday." Her laugh broke free, quiet, uncertain, but genuine. The following days blurred into meetings, arguments, compromises. Council chambers filled with the hum of translators, the shuffle of diplomats, the clatter of datapads. The alien woman stood before them again and again, her fire tempered by calm, her rage reshaped into reason. And always, somewhere in the back, the pilot sat with arms folded, tossing in the occasional sarcastic comment whenever the tension threatened to boil over. To everyone's shock, including his own, it worked. The rebellion cooled into negotiation. Agreements formed, shaky but real. A new council was proposed, one with seats for her people. It was not perfect, it was messy, fragile, subject to collapse at the slightest push, but it was something neither guns nor flames could have built. On the final night before their departure, the alien woman and the pilot stood together on the balcony of the council dome. Below them stretched the lights of the city, glittering like stars scattered across stone. "You have changed me," she said quietly. He raised an eyebrow. "For the better, I hope. I'd hate to think I just made you addicted to bad coffee and sarcasm." Her ears angled toward him, her smile small but certain. "You showed me another way. A way I did not believe possible." He shrugged, gaze fixed on the city below. "You showed me something too. That one voice can move crowds. That fury can be a shield, but it can also be a burden. And that sometimes, the bravest thing isn't fighting. It's putting the weapon down." They stood in silence, the weight of the galaxy heavy but somehow less suffocating. Finally, he muttered, "So what happens now? You go lead your people into a better future, and I limp off in the wheeze toward my next disaster." Her smile widened. "Perhaps. Or perhaps you stay. Not as a soldier. Not as a leader. But as a reminder." He blinked at her, surprised. For once, he had no joke ready. He simply nodded. The stars burned above, cold and eternal. Yet for the first time, the galaxy felt just a little warmer, stitched together not by war or fear, but by something stranger, rarer, and infinitely harder to destroy, the stubborn courage of connection. And somewhere deep in the hangar, the stellar wheeze gave a final, indignant wheeze, because even ships, it seemed, knew when a chapter had closed.